beauty, mystery, and tragedy. Mary Rogers was known as the Cigar Girl, who captivated New York. But her charm hid a dark story that ended in horror. Who was she, and what led to her shocking death? Today, we unravel the haunting mystery behind Mary Cecilia Rogers' short and tragic life. Mary Cecilia Rogers was born in New York City in the year 1820. When she was just 5 years old, her father passed away, leaving her and her mother alone. With no steady income, her mother, Mrs. Rogers, decided to open a boarding house on Nassau Street to support them both. As Mary got older, she began helping her mother manage the house, taking care of the guests and doing the daily chores. Mary grew up to be a very beautiful young woman. She had a tall figure, perfect body shape, smooth and glowing skin, and long black hair. She had a brunette look, which means she had dark hair and features. Her face was attractive, and her gentle and friendly personality made her even more lovable. People were drawn to her not just for her looks, but also because she was polite, kind, and charming. She quickly became well known in her neighborhood and had many friends and admirers. Wherever Mary went, she caught people's attention. Her beauty made people stop and stare, and soon her name began to spread beyond just her local area. Around that time, a man named John Anderson, who owned a successful cigar shop on Broadway near Thomas Street, heard about Mary's stunning appearance. Anderson was a smart businessman. He thought hiring such a beautiful girl to work at his shop would attract more customers and increase his sales. He believed that having her behind the counter would turn his store into a popular place, especially among young men. This happened in the early spring of 1840, when Mary was 20 years old. Anderson reached out to Mrs. Rogers and offered Mary a job at his cigar store, but Mrs. Rogers was not sure about letting her daughter take the job. Mary had never worked outside their home before, and the cigar store was often visited by young men with bad reputations. Mrs. Rogers was worried that it might not be a safe or suitable place for her daughter. However, Anderson made a very generous offer. He promised good pay and a respectful working environment. Mary, who was curious and excited to try something new, convinced her mother to let her take the job. Eventually, Mrs. Rogers agreed. As soon as Mary started working at the cigar shop, Anderson's idea worked perfectly. The shop became busier than ever, filled with customers eager to see the famous, beautiful girl. But Mary always behaved respectfully. She was cheerful and friendly with customers, smiling and talking politely, but she didn't allow anyone to cross the line. If someone acted inappropriately, she didn't hesitate to set boundaries. After working at the cigar store for about 10 months, something strange happened. Mary suddenly didn't show up for work one morning in late January 1841. This was very unusual, as she had always been regular and reliable. John Anderson, her employer, had no idea where she was or why she didn't come in. Mary's mother, Mrs. Rogers, was extremely worried and became frantic with fear. The police were informed, and soon the newspapers picked up the story. Since Mary had become famous as the beautiful cigar girl, her mysterious disappearance became big news in New York. Everyone was talking about where she might have gone. Then, 6 days later, Mary came back to the store as suddenly as she had vanished. She looked physically fine. There were no signs of harm or illness, but something had changed. The warm and cheerful smile that had once brightened the store was gone. In its place was a quiet, serious, and almost sad look. It was clear that something had happened during her time away. When people asked her what had happened or where she had gone, Mary gave only a short and vague answer. She said she had gone to visit relatives in the countryside. Her mother and Mr. Anderson also gave the same explanation, but no one gave more details, and it was clear that none of them wanted to talk about it. Because of this, People stopped asking questions, but the mystery remained. Not long after Mary came back, rumors began to spread. Some people said they saw her in New York during the time she was supposedly away. According to these rumors, she had been seen with a tall, good-looking naval officer. The news spread fast, and many people began to wonder if the story about visiting relatives had been made up. These rumors likely reached Mary, and they seemed to affect her deeply. Just a week after returning to work, Mary suddenly quit her job at the cigar store. She didn't explain her reasons clearly, but decided to stay home and live quietly with her mother again. Then, about a month later, there was a surprising announcement. Mary was engaged to be married. Her fiancé was a young man named Daniel Payne. He was a clerk, and he lived in the same house as Mary and her mother. It seemed like Mary was trying to move on and settle into a more peaceful and private life after the strange events and gossip that surrounded her. Even though things looked calm on the surface, many people still wondered what really happened during those 6 missing days. At 10 a.m. on a regular Sunday morning, on July 25, 1841, Mary knocked on her fiancé Daniel Payne's door and told him she was going to spend the day with her aunt, Mrs. Downing, who lived on Bleecker Street. Payne replied, "All right, I'll come pick you up tonight." But later that day, a powerful thunderstorm rolled in and heavy rain poured down. Payne had been out for most of the day, and since the weather was so bad, he assumed Mary wouldn't want to go home in such conditions. So, he didn't go to her aunt's place and simply returned home by himself. When he told Mrs. Rogers why he didn't bring Mary back, she was glad he hadn't made her come home in the storm. The next day, the storm cleared up, and Mrs. Rogers fully expected her daughter to return. But when Mary didn't show up, her mother became deeply worried. When Payne came home for dinner, Mrs. Rogers told him that Mary still hadn't returned. Without even stopping to eat, he rushed over to Mrs. Downing's house. To his shock, he found out that Mary had never gone there at all. Her worried mother remembered Mary's first disappearance a few months earlier, but this time felt different. Mary had left the house wearing only light clothes and a thin bonnet, so it didn't seem likely that she would choose to stay out after the storm had passed. Because of this, Mary's second disappearance caused an even bigger reaction than the first. For several days, there was no sign of her anywhere. But on July 28, 1841, Wednesday morning, some fishermen casting their nets near Castle Point in Hoboken found her body floating near the shore. It was badly injured, and not far from a small refreshment stand known as Sybil's Cave. Mary's once beautiful face was so badly beaten and swollen that it was unrecognizable. A thick cord was tied around her waist, with a heavy stone attached to the other end. A piece of lace from her dress was wrapped tightly around her neck, tight enough to cause choking. Deep marks on both her wrists showed that cords had been tied there as well. She was still wearing light kid gloves, and her small bonnet was hanging from her neck by its ribbons. Her clothes were badly ripped, and doctors later discovered that she had been violently raped before she died. Payne was quickly questioned by the police, but he explained his actions clearly and was immediately released. A week went by without any clues to solve the mystery, and the newspapers began heavily criticizing the police for their failure. In response, the authorities put out a public notice offering a big reward to anyone who could help catch and convict the person responsible for the murder. They also promised that anyone who had any guilty knowledge of the crime, except for the actual killer, would be granted full immunity and protection if their information led to the arrest and conviction of the murderer. The next day, the coroner received an anonymous letter from a young man living in Hoboken. He said he had seen Mary in Hoboken on Sunday, but hadn't come forward sooner because of what he called motives of perhaps criminal prudence. The man explained that while walking in the Elysian Fields, a popular summer spot on Sundays, he saw a boat leave the New York side carrying 6 rough-looking men and a well-dressed young woman he recognized as Mary Rogers. She and the men landed on the beach and walked into the woods. The writer was surprised to see her with such rough people, but noticed she seemed to go with them willingly, laughing happily as they left the shore. Just as they disappeared into the woods, a second boat left New York, pulled quickly across the river by 3 well-dressed gentlemen. One jumped ashore and met 2 other men waiting on the beach. He asked if they had seen a young woman and 6 men land from a boat a few minutes earlier. When they said yes and pointed in the direction they went, he asked if the men had been violent toward the girl. They said she seemed to go willingly. Without saying more, he went back to his boat, which immediately headed back to New York. The writer of the anonymous letter was never found, but the letter was published in the newspapers. The next day, the 2 gentlemen who had been walking on the beach came forward to confirm the story. They both recognized Mary Rogers by sight and said the girl who went into the woods with the 6 rough men looked very much like her, but they weren't close enough to say for sure that it was Mary. The next important clue came from a stagecoach driver named Adams. After waiting several weeks, he said that on that same Sunday, he had seen Mary arrive in Hoboken at Bull's Ferry. She was with a tall, well-dressed man with a dark complexion, and he saw them go together to a roadhouse near the Elysian Fields called Nick Mullins. Mrs. Loss was the owner of a small house near the woods where Mary Rogers was last seen. She remembered that on the day Mary disappeared, a tall, dark-complexioned man had come to her place with a young woman. After they had some refreshments, the man and woman went into the nearby woods. Not long after they left, Mrs. Loss heard a woman scream coming from the woods. But since the area was known for having many suspicious people and strange noises were common, she didn't pay much attention to the scream. Exactly 2 months after Mary's murder, on September 25, 1841, Mrs. Loss's children were playing in the woods. While exploring, they found some of Mary's belongings hidden in a thick patch of bushes. These items included a white petticoat, a silk scarf, a parasol, and a linen handkerchief with the initials M.R. on it. The ground nearby was torn up and the plants were crushed, showing signs of a violent struggle. A wide trail led away from the bushes, as if someone had dragged a body through the undergrowth. This trail went toward the river but soon disappeared into the woods. Everyone agreed these items belonged to Mary and were from the day she vanished. The police tried hard to find the tall, dark-complexioned man, who matched the description of a naval officer some people said was with Mary during her first disappearance, but no one was ever found who fit this description or could provide helpful information. Many people believed that Mary's mother knew more about the mysterious man who had been seeing her daughter than she admitted. There was a suspicion that she was hiding something, but no proof was ever found. Daniel Payne, Mary's fiancé, was deeply hurt by her terrible death. The shock affected him so much that he could not recover. Shortly after Mary's murder, on October 7, 1841, Daniel took his own life. His body was discovered in the same woods where Mary had likely been killed. A remorseful note was found with a message, "To the world, here I am, on the very spot. May God forgive me for my misspent life." So, Mary Rogers' life began with beauty and promise, but ended in a cloud of unanswered questions and heartbreak. Her tragic story shocked a nation and inspired writers like Edgar Allan Poe to write his story, The Mystery of Mary Rogers, which was based on Mary Rogers' disappearance and death. Though the truth was never fully uncovered, the mystery of the Cigar Girl continues to haunt history to this day.